Hello and welcome to this video. This is a installation guide for the Bykski water block for the Asus Strix Vega56 or Vega64, as they have the same PCB layout. Reason why I'm making this video? Well, it's because the manual that comes with the water block on this Bykski is basically a water block for a CPU manual, and the only other manual form there is a QR code that takes you straight to the page with instruction manuals in Chinese for a NVIDIA graphics card. So I figured I would like to share my experience, and hopefully this guide will help someone in the future who is also struggling with the installation of this water block, because it has some issues. The quality of the product seems great, but unfortunately the thermal pad supplied with it is not the correct thickness, and also obviously because there's no instruction manual, then you don't know where what screw goes and so on. They also give you a bunch of screws and washers in surplus in case you lose some, I guess. But initially it can get the better of you because you don't know where they all should go and so on. Let me get out the water block. So what you're looking at here is the water block. It's a beautifully crafted water block, and basically what we're dealing with here is on this heightened section there comes a thermal pad. In this indented section there comes another thermal pad. In this indented section there comes another thermal pad, and here's a little heightened block as well with some thermal pads needed. And I also noted there's 1, 2, and there's 3 small little blocks that actually also take thermal pads. Alright, so the problem is Bykski gives you these grey 1.2mm thick thermal pads, and in the case of this recessed piece, it's too thick. And then what happens is when you tighten down the PCB, it flexes the PCB because they have only so much that they can squish, and so they're pushing up too much in this recessed piece. So in here we're going to put 0.5mm of thermal pad. We're going to be using the Thermal Grizzly -8 pad. Also, this heightened section here, this cools the VRMs, I know, and this heightened section here, I believe, not VRM specifically, but also something of similar height. So in the case of that, the 1.2 is not thick enough again. So we'll be switching to 1.5s for those. Right, so let's take out the PCB. For the purposes of this video, I assume that you already dismantled your GPU cooler off the PCB. It's a fairly straightforward task. Just loosen all the screws and pull it off. The backplate has a little plug here that you must just take care of not to rip out. Just loosen your backplate, lift a little bit and pull it out. But other than that, nothing too complicated. So what we have is the -8 pads from Thermal Grizzly. Obviously you can use whichever pad you want as long as it's the right thickness. The two thicknesses is 0.5 and 1.5mm. Obviously you'll need thermal paste. Usually I would go with Thermal Grizzly Crynaut, but I'm servicing quite a few of these Vegas, and they eat up a lot of thermal paste, as you would see later on. The thermal paste should last quite a while as it's not stressed too much. Then obviously you'd need some alcohol. Can't take out the whole bottle and show it here, but I'm using 99.9% alcohol used for electronics. Isopropyl alcohol is also appropriate. The next thing you would need is your X bracket that comes off of the original cooler. We're going to be using this again. Bixby does not ask you to use this, they just want you to use normal spring loaded screws. But a lot of people have found online that if you rather use the X bracket, your cooling performance is better. A lot of people are struggling with cooling performance without this X bracket installed, so we're using the original X bracket. With this water block comes included a bunch of screws and washers, as I said before. You don't need to use all of them, of course, so what you will need to use is 2 of these spring-loaded screws, 9 of these long chrome screws. They only give you these ones, so you can't really choose the wrong ones. I can't pick them all up, but here you go. 11 of these translucent washers. They seem to be plastic. These white thick type washers, 3 of them. What you would also need to retain from your original setup is these black screws. You only need 3 of them. This is the shorter variant. Obviously, if you've assembled it, you disassembled yours, you would see that there are shorter black screws and longer black screws. These are the shorter ones. Let's get down to measuring what our thermal pad sizes should be. (109.42), so that would most likely just be 110. Let's check the width. 11.3, so we'll just make that 11.5 to be sure. Let's measure the VRMs. 110.29. Alright. This is about 7, so we'll go a little bit over. If I measure it on the water block, it's 7, so we'll just make it 7 then. Here's more of these. 17.7. Okay. (10.2). Alright. As for the ones on the side, what I think it was this side or this side? This side. Those small little ones, I think I'll probably just cut them according to the water block. They must be very small. 4, 3. Not quite sure how I'm gonna cut that. It's quite a small cut, but we'll get it right. Okay, let's get to cutting some pads. Alright, so we have finished cutting all of them. Some of them aren't cut the straightest, but it's very close and very good, so it's fine. Alright, now let's go and apply our thermal pads. Okay, next we are going to mount the small thermal pads in this area. You will notice all of a sudden these aren't here anymore, these aren't here anymore, these aren't here anymore. That's because I had to reshoot the section for the small thermal pads, as I initially had the wrong location for them. So please note, if you see them in a different location later on in the video, that is the incorrect location. Where I'm putting them now is the correct location. Just so you can have a closer look, where we are putting them is on these black little chips here, and there's obviously one as well under that thermal pad. Sorted. Alright, so that is the correct location for the small thermal pads in this area. Next thing is, before you install the water block, you would want to install your backplate first. The reason being, there are some screws on this PCB that you will not be able to install after the water block is on, and well, if you would like them to be there, then you must install the backplate first. So that's not a problem. Let's go ahead and do that. Always remember, on your backplate, obviously because this is a Strix, it's got the little light to do. Obviously if you want to control this light or just have it or whatever, you must just remember to plug it back in, because otherwise if you forget, then you have to disassemble the whole water block again just to be able to take off the backplate. Alright, now I'll show you which ones you will tighten. This is the reason why we keep the original small black screws. So the 3 screws will go here, here, and here. There. So first I'll just quickly screw them in, but not tighten them. Alright, backplates all lined up nicely. Now we can tighten them down. Use your own discretion, obviously, how tight it must be. Right, now let's get down to the water block. So the first handy tip is use the box, because you will flip this over and lower it onto the water block. Now the problem is, obviously, you have this piece here that sits high. So which obviously creates when it's lying flat like this, that it's heightened in one way, and then obviously that gives you trouble to install the water block. So obviously with the box you can let it hang over, and then it will lower flat onto the water block. As for the die, I'm sure as you know on the Vegas that this thing, the VRAM is integrated all here on this die. So this is the HBM memory, so no VRAM chips around here, and that's the core. And basically these things eat up a lot of thermal paste, because on these lines there's a lot of potential for hot spotting, and that drives up the temps, and it thermal throttles on the temperatures that it reads off the hotspot, or as they would call it, the junction temperature. So in essence, you need to fill it with a lot of this thermal paste so that the heat transfer is even towards the water block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the thermal paste now. Now we're going to lower this onto it. I like to look from the top, obviously, usually, to try and align it as good as I can on the first go. One thing to remember, on these two mountings, we are going to put 2 of these plastic translucent washers. That's the reason why we have 11 and not 9, because they are simply there for a bit of spacing. If you don't put them there, you pick up quite a bit of flex on your PCB on that area. So I just use that as a little spacer to help even it out. Right, so now we're going to lower this from the top down. Also, you need to remember these white washers. They come here. They fit snugly on there because there's a place for them to sit. They perch on there, and here. So these 3 spots. The GPU, we are going to lower it onto the water block, taking care that the water block is all the way to the edge, so that we remember to let this side that sticks up go past the edge. I'd say that's not too bad. First thing I want to do is I want to tighten some of the screws on the corner just to sort of get this thing settled. For this we're going to use these little chrome screws that are so long, combined with a little plastic washer. I'm just going to start on this corner here. Alright, now I've got the corners down, so now we can work a bit more easily. The next thing I want to focus on is tightening down these 2 screws. They clamp down mostly on the VRMs. I'm going to be using the spring-loaded screws. I'm sure you noticed I'm using an electric screwdriver. That's purely just to get the screws as far in as I can before having to tighten them down. As for these spring-loaded screws, I'm starting from the beginning with the hand screwdriver. They need a bit of pressing down and control. What I'm going to do now is I'm gonna start tightening some of the other screws. There's not a whole lot left. There's this one is used, and this one is used, and this one is used, obviously, as we did earlier with the original screws. So we're gonna go with this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. This one is unused, it goes nowhere. So if you screw in one of the chrome ones in there, it'll literally just screw and then suddenly fall through. If you really want to fill that little hole, you can use another one of your short screws from the original set of screws that come from the original cooler. So yes, I'm gonna continue with the chrome screws right now. The only thing remaining now is the X bracket. This X bracket is quite a weird thing to fit. It doesn't exactly feel natural because it's lifted on the sides, as you can see. So once you screw down a side, the other side lifts a lot, and you have to press down quite hard on the other side again to tighten it down. I'll just start with one of these corners. This screw is quite short, so it bottoms out quite quickly. Okay, now I'm going to do the next one. It's quite a little angry little bracket, this. I'm just going to tighten them all nicely. Don't worry about the clacking sound, that was just a spring bouncing over itself basically, as the screws on this X bracket is also spring loaded. And there you go, tightened down. And that concludes this video. That is one water-blocked Vega56. Please also remember that this water block is actually for Vega64, but they are essentially the same card, so they are compatible with each other. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment or a like. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will be doing more videos like this in the future, as I have reference Vega56s that I need to water block. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.